I market myself as a non-traditional tutor and primarily towards neurodivergent people. And it's the same when it comes to my composing, that when it comes to film music, I market myself as I do it the old school way. And if there's a job that comes along that's not the old school way, I don't mind. I let that go to somebody who's better suited. So I'm not trying to get every job out there. I make sure that my website is up to date. I make sure that I'm part of groups on Facebook, even though I really try to limit Facebook time. I use it solely for professional reasons now. And I suppose the main advice I'd like to give is this is a long journey. If you want to get a job tomorrow, it's not going to happen. But if you work on yourself, work on your art, work on yourself as a human being, then something will come along and you never know what that might snowball into.
Hi, welcome to episode 3 of the Scenes+Sessions Stories by Music podcast. I am your host, Xavier Lowe, and I am joined again with my co-host, Jonathan Worsley, Sam Griffiths, and Chiron Fairmont. And we're going to talk about on the Getting Started part 2. So if you didn't listen to our previous episode, please go back and listen to it. We go on extremely detailed on certain topics. This part, we're going to be talking a little bit more on the practical side of the business part of it. In the previous episode, we talked about more about the hardware, the technology, the tools are basically on how to start. Now is all about the mental and actual practical of those tools. And we're going to be speaking mainly on what's the main fundamental thing. The main thing of what really makes you stand out is a portfolio, and how you do that, it depends on situations. I want to talk about the experiences of what your portfolio is from the other 3. So Sam, when you started in the business, it's just like, did you have like a major portfolio of like when you wanted to go for production music or anything in the trailer house parts? Did you present like a massive like CD collection or something like that?
I actually didn't. So this is something that kind of I wish I'd done slightly differently actually. So I didn't have any portfolio, and a lot of the thing that a lot of people go is, if I want work, how do I get portfolio full of work if I haven't already got the work? It's the experience versus beginner thing. And the way I would say is actually create your own portfolio, write your own brief almost. So write a couple of tracks as if they're client works before you've even got any clients to reach out to clients with, because it will be so much better for them to get to know what you sound like rather than just approaching them without. I actually ended up getting my start because I was writing for production music labels, and I happened to be co-writing with one guy who was already in the label, and he got me on as a co-composer through a Facebook group. And through that, then I ended up writing a couple of tracks for this label with him, and then wrote quite a few on my own. And the first initial tracks that I did, I wasn't particularly happy with, but over that time I was practicing and getting better. And by that first sort of 6 months, I got a good basis of portfolio work that I'd built up that I could then approach other libraries with, and other maybe film directors and things like that, especially because having that start within the music production library gave me some fairly small credits, but gave me credits which allowed me to sort of say my music's being used on this, on that. And that is as important as writing good music. It's getting your music heard by the right people.
Fair enough, really. That's very interesting insight. I want to pass the same question to Jonny. Since you've been spoken that in the past that you are very limited on what kind of clientele that you go with, do you tailor your portfolio to that, or is it like a little bit more generic in either in for composition, orchestration, or especially even in education? Do you tailor your portfolio to that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I tailor it to the sort of work that I want to be doing is the sort of work that I would have in my portfolio, because I try and only do the jobs that I actually want to do. So for me, in my portfolio and my line of work, it tends to be the notated score is a large part of my portfolio. That's the kind of work that I'd be having is people wanting to see the quality of the notation alongside the music, whether that's for concert music or education or film music. And I believe that concert music, or at least my concert music and my film music, are one and the same thing. It's the same sort of sensibilities, at least, even if it's a different outcome.
Writing for film, is it like, do you try and like steer heavy into the parts of like for more of the audio sounding of it? Because like some of the people that work in film don't really know much about like the music theory side. Would you say that you steer more to that part of the sort of like selling point rather than the notational?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the audio at the end of the day is what we're doing, but I would still be presenting audio that can be backed up by a substantial score so that they know that that's where my loyalties lie when it comes to music.
Do you have a long list, or is it just like a small selection, like about like maybe like 5 tracks?
My portfolio, so I've only done this week actually, is on my website, is rather than it just being one long list of all the music I've ever made that I'd actually want to be out there, I've sorted it into concert, film, and popular music. So that's what my portfolio is. It's every piece of music that I'm still proud of. Most of the time, that's not stuff from university. It's stuff that I've done outside. But what I really like from university, as Sam was saying, was at least during my master's year when I did the film music side, it gave me the opportunity to do some film music and put that in my portfolio, even if it wasn't getting paid for anything.
It's very interesting insight. So you're just showing your best qualities of your work and putting that forward to anyone who wants to observe it. Chiron, I want to pass the same question to you as well, but you're speaking on I don't want to speak for you, but like you're probably approaching it from a more of a like popular music, more background on that part. Would you say that you have a very similar approach in that sense of towards like people that are in film, or would you try a different approach because you're more coming from a more of a pop or a producer background?
So the way I've got it at the moment is I've done a similar approach to Jonny, and as what a lot of other composers have done as well, and you've sorted it in, and you sort it into either sort of genre specific or certain areas of music that applies to. And so in my regard, it's mainly genre specific, less concert, because I don't have any concert work, so it's going to be purely genre and style split. So I've got different genre reels where they're generally like pop and EDM, maybe some ambient stuff, and then there's maybe a sound design reel stuff to trying to sort of showcase the different areas that I work in.
So it's like one portfolio or a reel like is one style, and then there's another one in like sort of like, say for example, like one is for EDM and one is for like more orchestral hybrid.
Yeah. So they're kind of lumped together. So if the styles are kind of got more overarching similarities, they're going to be lumped together in the same reel, the same portfolio. It's all one portfolio. So for example, they're all hosted on SoundCloud and then just streamed from there on the website. So I specifically have edited the tracks together to be just one, 5-minute long reel of specific tracks. And then there's another one where it's, again, tracks that are specifically altogether. So people might look at all my discography and see, well, it's more 80% electronic, 20% orchestral. That's the way my portfolio works. And so, because I haven't done too much film work that I've put out there. So if you're someone that's writing music for film or writing production music as well, you've kind of got to be a little bit careful of what you post on your website or what you post on SoundCloud, because I've had some production companies that say that they're not, they don't want me to post the audio tracks on social media and such, because they obviously, if it's meant for licensing, they want that one place on their website for people to go and listen to it and potentially license it. They don't want, especially because I might not have posted a link to where the album is. So, but what I usually do is I do a photography portfolio, so to speak, on my main front page. So you stick a load of the photos of the stuff you've worked on. So if you've worked on an album, you stick that, and then in the description you put a link to it, especially if it's a public production music link. Put a link to the particular album, and it will lead people to it. And that's another example of your portfolio. It's just not as easier to access, but it's the quickest way to get around that kind of issue of not being able to post it on your own website.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. In my experience, I always pitch an audio reel, so no videos or any film clips that used it, to clients. That's what they generally, that reels them in, because they're there to, like, because they want because they want your music. Do they want your particular style? But in the past, is just like, you can work with film, but I think that's like sort of a less caveat nowadays. My best thing is that I try to like keep it in the same style and basically like keep it roughly of your best always show your best quality. So basically put your best foot forward. So as always show the track that you're most proud of or you think is the best is obviously first, and then work from there. Because like, obviously these clients are going to be like listening to like about probably like 20 seconds for each channel, so you better show the best parts of it. That's what I would say. You were saying earlier that it's just like it's particular links and where you put them to show them is going to be quite difficult, as all of us, we use our website to show our reels and basically portfolios, but it might be difficult for someone who doesn't have that sort of resource, and that gets a little bit complicated. SoundCloud is good. That's where I first started. Obviously there are downsides nowadays because it's not, the SoundCloud ecosystem is a lot different when we all started now.
A word of warning as well, that production music companies, if you're pitching music or pitching it to music supervisors, they advise heavily against using SoundCloud, because they say that if they come against one ad whatsoever, it immediately puts them off. So the best website to use is Realcrafter, because they've got a free tier.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's the best one to use.
Yeah, I use Realcrafter and I present it to not just to production music, but also to clients, because there's a lot more sort of freedoms that you can just to make it show presentable, and you can present it in like more audible quality, like in WAV files. SoundCloud, you can only present it in a compressed MP3 file, which is not particularly great, really. So I would say that's the best start. So I would say go into Realcraft, the free trial. I can't remember exactly on the top of my head, but you can upload at least 10 tracks, really, which is more than enough. So I think that's the best start. Now we're going to go into the actual topic to actually how to get them. And obviously the simple part of getting them, there's multiple different methods of doing it, but I would like to talk about like possibly networking on the aspects of like actually going to events and or meeting people in IRL to basically get the sum of these. We basically build these relationships, because we've always been talked about on, if you're like a film music nerd, like all of us are really, like the best relationships and the big film composers, like they got their relationships with major friendships, like John Williams and Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer. And if you go really back, there was Bernard Herrmann and Alfred Hitchcock, but don't look much in because that relationship got dicey with the later of his career. What would you say your biggest advice would be in a networking sense? Sam, I think you started your career on that principle of just networking. On that, what would your biggest advice would be on that sense?
I would say first off, don't think of interactions as networking. Think of them as just going and making friends. Because if you're there specifically to get something out of somebody, if you're there as like a give me work, you come across really too desperate. And essentially you're just going to make friends and then you work with friends. Most people in this industry work with friends. If they're in a position, if they're a director and they've got a composer who they're friends with, they've gone out for a few drinks with, they've just gone out for a few meals or whatever, that's already a massive step up to, hey, I'm a composer, I write music, but then here's my business card, and then go home and never remember them at all. Ultimately, you've got to be in that person's head. And sometimes you'll go to a networking event and you'll get a load of people's contact information, and most of it will go to waste. You will never hear from them again, and they will never hear from you again. But fundamentally, it's like going to any place. You go to a workplace, you go to university, there's people that you bond with over there, and they're people who you will get down the line. If you go in, I need to reach out and need every single person to be my friend / be my networking buddy, then it's not the right vibe, and everyone's going to feel that, and you're going to feel kind of cold. So that's my fundamental one advice is don't go in with the idea of being a networker. Go in and be a buddy, be a friend. And then the other thing is I went to a couple of networking events, one done by Spitfire Audio. I don't know if they still do them, but I think just meeting other composers as well, because you never know, you might co-write with people, you might be able to get together as a team and become a band almost, or you don't know where life will take you. So go to these things. And a piece of advice I got from one of those is there's so much more to it than just the music. It's the human side of things. If you're trying to become an assistant to another composer, or you're trying to get a musician to work with you, I mean, things like personal hygiene, stuff like that. I mean, it's basic stuff, but if you're spending 12 hours a day with someone, or 10 hours a day, or 8 hours a day with someone, if you're working at their studio, something like smelling nice is going to get you the gig, going to get you to come back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like pretty much just presenting your best self forward always. Kind of to just sort of think of an event as making friends. And obviously, as speaking on behalf as an introvert, it's just that could be the most terrifying thing, really. I've always been told by by previous mentors, it's sort of like dating. It's the same ways of dating. You can't just go into and basically expect to get married at the first fight. It's the same principle as gardening as well. It's just you have to plant the seeds, you have to water it, you have to nurture it, and basically, obviously, it takes time, and it could take years. You never know who's connected to who. It's like when I was living in London, there was one person that I spoke to, and he was a cinematographer there, but over the lines, it's just haven't heard about anything about this, but fairly recently, about a year ago, oh, I got this reference from someone called John, and he's just I should speak to you, and I need someone to help orchestrate something. You never know what opportunities can come around. So it's always important to keep some people in your network. Sometimes you live in somewhere in the middle of Scotland or the middle of Wales or whatever, really. You don't have that particular opportunity. So the other option is basically reaching out, or presenting cold emailing, Jonny, I want to know what your perspective on, like, because you don't live near like a major city or anything like that. What is your perspective, and like, what's your advice to people who like don't have the luxury of like or commuting to like a city like London or anything like that?
My advice is that networking is a scary word. I think, as Sam says, Xavier says, be friends with people, be a good person, be kind, treat people like they're your friends, and be confident in your own abilities. Work on your craft. When you're at secondary school and you're doing an exam, the teachers, they often told us at school, show off to the examiner, show them what you can do. And you want to be in that position where you're so confident with that you know what you're doing, that you're not coming across as eager, like overly eager. And as Sam says, that you don't come across as desperate. Also, as Sam says, people can tell when you walk into a room and you're trying to be friends with everyone for the wrong reasons. I've found the best way for my work, so this is about my teaching work, but this applies for any other work because I've got commissions through my teaching work and word of mouth, is by having a USP. So for me, I like with teaching, just as an aside, I market myself as a non-traditional tutor and primarily towards neurodivergent people. And it's the same when it comes to my composing, that when it comes to film music, I market myself as I do it the old school way. And if there's a job that comes along that's not the old school way, I don't mind. I let that go to somebody who's better suited. So I'm not trying to get every job out there. I make sure that my website is up to date. I make sure that I'm part of groups on Facebook, even though I really try to limit Facebook time. I use it solely for professional reasons now. And I suppose the main advice I'd like to give is this is a long journey. If you want to get a job tomorrow, it's not going to happen. But if you work on yourself, work on your art, work on yourself as a human being, then something will come along. And you never know what that might snowball into.
Yeah, that's definitely, I completely agree with all that advice, really. This is a career that is going to be like very long term, and it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to take some time to get some sustainability. This is I always preach that this is a career that is not for profit, or it is only for people that is really passionate about this. There are plenty of professions that are much easier and much more financially sustainable than this really is. Like, if you really want to make money, then you should look into like work into finance or law, because those are the ones that's going to give you money. Really, you don't want to be naive as well. It's just like you want to have this point where it's sustainable, right? You want to have like a career that you want to build, and basically just like have it and know it's going to be sustainable. Chiron, I want to know what's your opinion on the same question as well. Speaking as a person on the more audio technology side of things, as well as like working as a music producer.
So I definitely encourage collaboration with fellow artists and fellow producers and things. It's one of the best ways of expanding your palette of sounds, and just sometimes just meeting people virtually, because even though you may not get a chance to meet them in person, sometimes just even chatting to them over the likes of Teams or even just a phone call can actually be effectively, it's that human element, what you want, and when you're chatting to someone and bouncing ideas off them, it really is quite a nice feeling. Because years ago I was really introverted, but I feel like I've grown as I've got older and become a little bit more extroverted and a bit more outgoing. For example, you're right in the sense that the networking events are usually in big cities, so the only places that they're really frequent is going to be down in London. And so I've only been down to London solo effectively twice in the last 10 years. The first time was when I visited yourself, Xavier, and we went to a networking event, which was more of a generalized one, wasn't anything specialized, just to meet sort of fellow-minded creatives, and we met a few people there, which was kind of interesting. And then the second time was last year, where I for a company I'd written some music for. Got an email out of the blue saying, "Oh, we're organising this event down in London. You're invited." The difference between those two was the fact that because I was visiting yourself, it wasn't scary whatsoever. It was just jumping on the train and seeing another friend. But the issue I had with last year was the fact that I didn't know anyone going down into London, and I was really sort of freaked out a little bit at the concept because I got that email. And I was like, I haven't networked that much in recent years. I was like, no, I need to seize this opportunity and go and meet people. And it was invaluable. I met so many really nice people. And in these kind of events, sometimes you get the rare opportunities where you get relationships that last a lifetime. You get fellow-minded composers that actively want to collaborate with you and all that. The word that I wanted to sort of summarize all of this is authenticity, being authentic, not going in. So the idea of, like everyone's been saying, the idea of don't see it as networking. Yeah, because if you're seeing it as purely as to get another contact out of it, then people are just going to see right through you, and they might respond to a couple of emails or even might not even respond at all. Whereas if you are genuinely going in to that event, contacting people and showing your passion and just wanting to have a relationship, have friendship with them, not thinking about collaboration, not thinking about, you don't want to think about it in terms of like, oh, is this person going to help me out in some way? That is really the most wrong way of going about it, because people don't want to feel like they're being used, because that's the worst thing you can do in this industry. Is it's effectively an insult if you're just thinking about how can I use this person to get a boost up in the industry. It's all about authenticity when it comes to building that circle of friends, that's the circle of acquaintances. Yes, the overarching summary of it is, yes, it's networking to a certain degree, but I agree with everyone else. Don't think of it as networking whatsoever. It needs to be being authentic in the sense of how you go about finding those friendships and those connections, but also being about your authentic self when you're going to meet these people. Don't go with this idea of I need to act like this, I need to act like that, because if the event you're coming across as like this amazing person and it's like, oh, and you're saying I've done this, I've done this and done that, and then it takes one conversation in the future where that mask might slip if you've been inauthentic, and they'll be like, what's going on here? And it completely eviscerates all of that work that person might have done. So authenticity is key.
I definitely agree that you brought up the topic of authenticity, because it's like that's what really compels people really to really work with you, because of the authenticity, and you can just be your truly self, and you can bond over genuine connections, really. Because it's just like, if there's such a thing called a perfect person, then I don't really want to know, because it's just like no one is that perfect, really. We all have our own quirks, we all have our moments, we all have like particular interests, or if you're not neurodivergent, you have your own fixations. Yeah, so it's all these things. Is just like you never know what you can bond over, because it's just like there's people in film or whatever profession, there's people who's going to be interested in certain things. Like there was one time I worked with a film director that is just like was a major fan of like Star Wars noises, and we just bond over about the weirdness sounds of Chewbacca. And so it was just like, that was just a very interesting thing. So it's just like you'll never know who you bond with and that stuff. So I would say the best book to really read and how authenticity works, it is a book called The Go-Giver, and we will be probably talking about like on that subject in future episodes. But like The Go-Giver really shows like how authenticity shows you can really make a mark in whatever industry you want to go into. So
those unique interests and the so-called imperfections that you mentioned, Xavier, that's how we're all still composers. That's why there's 8 billion people on the planet. and each one of us 8 billion people would have a unique musical voice because we're all individual. And that's the hope that I have whenever I'm thinking about composing. And I'm sure we've all got into the mindset every now and then, like, why am I doing this? I'm just doing something the same as everybody else. What's the point? Why not get AI to do it? But it's because we're human and we have that. And there's something else you said, Chiron, that I just want to hone in on, that you talked about this networking event. And the first thing that you remembered about the networking event was how nice the people were, because that's what we remember. That's what it means to be human. And that's why we do this. It is that human connection.
Definitely. That's the whole point. It's just general people, and we always get this mind as just like having terrified. But the thing is like, you have to think, what is the worst thing can happen? The worst thing I can think of, basically, you can do is just embarrass yourself. But you could just shrug it off. It just shows your sense of humor, basically. That's all it is. It's just like, whoops, I just fell. There's just like, you could just laugh that off, really. It's just, that's the worst thing you could do, really.
I think, to be honest, at these kind of events as well, I think that everyone will understand, people aren't stupid. They know that you're probably going to be nervous. If everyone else if you don't know anyone else there, they're probably going to understand that there's going to be nerves in the mix, and you're more likely to make an ass of yourself when you're really nervous, accidentally say the wrong thing or whatever, and be really apologetic and feel like you've embarrassed yourself. But if you're just being authentic and just being a genuinely nice person, then I think that will easily, wipe over that, so that people will remember the nicer side of you rather than you said something wrong. We don't constantly say the right things when they're meant to be said. So it's just being yourself, and especially if you are passionate about your subject, that naturally comes out anyway.
Of course it does.
When you're talking to someone, the words really won't fail you. Is that when I've in the past, where if it's a subject I'm not as confident about talking about, I'm more likely to stumble over myself. But as soon as I get onto a topic I'm like, that I absolutely love to death, I'm just, you can't stop me,
How about
it's an
computer specs?
avalanche. Exactly. Yeah. yeah. So talk about anything technology, anything audio, and I will talk your ear off for
We
hours.
love it, Chiron. We wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah,
it's and that's just one of the things. But I could easily listen to Jonny talk about modes in music theory and prog rock and John Williams.
£35 an hour, thank you.
Yes, yeah. I don't get it for free. No, but I do love, even if it's a topic that's not truly kind of related to mine, I still love listening to it. If it's something just genuinely interesting, you as humans, you pick up on that passion in someone, and it draws you in. It's almost infectious to see that kind of passion in someone else.
Yeah, definitely. On the segue of Jonny charging us, basically, we're going into basically on the pricing of the services. You need to know what your pricing is, and there's multiple different factors about it. And Sam, what's your opinion, and what advice would you give on someone to know what kind of pricing that they would have?
I would say that obviously it depends a lot on who your client is, and I mean we always get it wrong sometimes. I think it's easy to get it wrong, but one thing I would say is never underprice yourself, because one thing I did when I was first starting out is I would do I'd mix a track for £50, and then one thing that I realized is the £50 client is a lot harder to work with than the £5,000 client, and it's exactly that thing. The person who is putting the money into it is actually way more chill about things, and they'll communicate way better. And because also you're getting paid a decent amount, you don't mind going and doing changes, versus if you've done, let's say you've made £50 and you've done a couple of hours on it at this point, then you start going, okay, I'm done. And then then they come back with more changes. And at some point you go in, well, I'm making less than I would if I worked at McDonald's. And at some point you go, this is not worth it anymore. And because of that, you get resentful of the person. So charging for the right amount is always necessary. It depends a lot on budget. Like when you're first starting out as well, like if you're working with student filmmakers, they're going to have very little budget. I mean, maybe none at all. And if you're just starting out and you want stuff for your portfolio, that could be a wise investment. You don't need to necessarily make your living from the first job you ever do. And in fact, it could be worth investing in that relationship by doing something for free for them. And then maybe later on when they've got, a bigger budget, they might still bring you on and you cultivate that relationship. Then there's also other types of work where you can work for a percentage of the final thing. And then it works off licensing. This is where I make most of my money from, which is the licensing side of things. So I actually do a lot of work for free, and then later on down the line when it gets used, it gets paid. It's very difficult to know exactly where your pricing is, but I would say just make sure you value your time, and you're not just accepting anything, because that's a way to burn out and race to the bottom. Because if you say you'll charge 100, and then they say, okay, that's going to be 12 hours work. Okay, then that's £8 an hour. If then it turns out, that's not much at all, and then it comes out as there's revisions, that becomes even less. If you say then it's going to be cost per hour, you want to make it a decent rate, so not anything like £8 an hour. You want it to be a lot more than that.
Definitely. I would say you need to know what your worth is, because it's like that's the most important thing, especially when you want to do this for work, doing the early stages of your career. Because when you start work, you have to know how much you're going to get, how much work you're going to put in, and how much you're going to get at the end. Because like if you're going to be working on these hours on whatever client you're working with, if it's less than minimum wage, then you're pretty much like, what's the point of it? You could have just got something at McDonald's or any part-time job you can pays you roughly the same, really. So you kind of like, you need to know where your standpoint is. I always say that whatever project, whether it's music or whatever, there should be a revision clause, because it's like, doesn't matter how much you charge, if you don't put a revision clause into something like that, you'll be ending up doing revisions, and then at some point the amount of hours that you put in and the amount of pay you get out, you come to the point where you're just working for minimum wage, where you could just do another job. But you need to know when to say no, really. You can say no. It's just like that, they're not forced. No one's twisting your arm unless they're physically actually there. Then you can sue them for court. So, but like, that's the thing. Is just like, you don't have to take on a job if they're not valuing you. I always value doing something for free and that you enjoy is better than doing something that you are paid and you hate, really. That is the motto I always go by, because it's just like, if you're not gonna enjoy what you're doing, then what's the point of it, really? Because it's just like, you're gonna be working majority of your life in your career anyway. It's just like, it might as well be something that you enjoy. So it's just like, that's the motto of it. So Jonny, what's your opinion on like an advice, or what would you give on like pricing yourself as a service? Do you do that as an educator as well, as just to know what you're pricing, or do you do that for other works like yourself for orchestration and other things?
So most of my pricing concerns come down to education. I've learned it all the hard way. I wasn't following any guides when I first started out. My very first teaching job, I was charging £10 for an hour, and it cost me £4 to get the bus there. And then the company took 25%. So I ended up with £3 odd for an hour's work. But that student then snowballed into the rest of my work. So even though we always say, well, don't undercharge yourself. If I hadn't have done it then, I wouldn't be where I am now teaching music for a career. But I was young and I had another job, and it was just something I was doing on the side, and I was aware why I was doing it. But what I've also found with my teaching is that every time I have a lull in students, I increase my price by £5 an hour. And then you enter another bracket of clientele that are willing to charge that much. And it's going to be an interesting adventure. What are they expecting from that line of work? There's another thing that Sam and Xavier, you've been saying, which is about you might end up earning less than you would at McDonald's. And yeah, that is true, especially if you're doing it as your full-time career. I'd rather be writing music for a living, earning less than I would at McDonald's, than working at McDonald's for some fairly decent pay. Might not pay the bills, but the life satisfaction is there. The one thing that I've come to terms with is that I'm a slow worker, and as a result, still to this day, I have trouble turning off from work mode, and I struggle with that work-life balance. Now, when you're a musician as a hobby, when your music is a hobby as well as your life, that's really quite tricky, because I can finish a day's work and I'll turn around and I'll start playing the piano for hours for fun. But at some point, if you're working on a film or whatever it is that you're working for, you need to have your hours down, and then you can completely decompress from that. And that's something I'm still working on, but it's something I would definitely recommend to anybody who's starting this. There's one other piece of advice that I would give, which is we should replace the word should with could. So, I just use the word should, but let's say somebody comes to you with a potential job and you think to yourself, I should do this. It would be good for my career. Instead, flip it around to, I could do this, but is it right for me right now? I've got other things on in my life. I can't dedicate this time to doing this. Maybe I am working at McDonald's, a great stable income. Trust yourself, trust your instincts. And it's all right to say no, as Xavier says.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like, obviously there are points where you have to compromise and basically kind of have to like pay your dues. Obviously you have to do like side jobs and like have a day job and to supplement your living expenses. Obviously there's nothing wrong with that. I want to make that clear, and just basically is just like, there's nothing wrong with that. All of us have done it. I have done it, and I assure the rest of my co-hosts that have done it before have to pay their dues. But the thing is like, you have to understand where you want to make yourself. You have to decide whether you want to have a job or will you want to have a career, because it's like a job gives you money, right? That is it. As a career, it builds you relationships, builds your skills, builds your knowledge, builds community, and as well gives you progression as well as money. So which one would you have? I would rather have this, the career path, because even though it's going to like, I have to work and like build it from scratch and that stuff, and then it's probably going to take me longer, but I'd rather have that because it has much more aspects to it. As a job, it only gives me money. There's nothing else.
Another hard thing is that if you're going down this route for a film music career, for most people, your families are not going to understand.
Definitely.
It's not a 9 to 5. We're working down at the office. You're going to have that struggle.
I can testimony that all the time, because it's like there are points where you're going to be in your career, you're going to be working late. There was one time when I was in London, I had to work for a short film, and we were working right into 2 a.m. in the morning, and it's just like, it's not fun, I tell you that. But if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would do it again because I enjoyed it. Really, it's just like, was I sleep deprived? I was hallucinating at the end. Yes, I was, but like I enjoyed it. But that's the whole point of it.
Another thing is like, if you're just leaving university or leaving school and you're seeing a lot of friends all wanting to do the same thing, and a lot of people will stop and get a quote unquote better, like proper job, and you'll see their lifestyle overtake where yours is because they're now working 40 hours a week at a bank or something. There is definitely a temptation at the start to give up because it's like, this is so difficult to get off the ground, but it is so worth it when you do eventually sort of start making a little bit of money from it, that you can sustain yourself from it alone, it does become more satisfactory because then you're in the same position as the people who gave up, but now you're also still working on what you want to do. And I think the difference between success and failure is just perseverance, like, because the people who succeeded have failed multiple times and just got back up again and tried again and tried again and tried again until something hit the wall and carried on. It's very easy to go, okay, I'll just go and get a job in an office working 9 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with doing that if that's what you want to do. But if you want to become a musician and composer, and you're going to be compelled to keep going at this and do the part-time job at the same time, sure, but don't do a full-time job and give up on the music completely.
Yeah. And what I also, and you spoke to a little bit earlier as well, is just that what really kills a lot of people going down this path, and like, and I really challenge this to people, is just like, don't really try and compare yourself to what we considered like the grand masters of and our profession. Really, don't we always compare ourselves to the position of like John Williams, Ennio Morricone, Alan Silvestri, all that stuff, because it's like how they reached their careers. Well, the thing is like, you can't compare yourself because their position was different from where you are, and also they lived in a different environment than when we are. So you have to counter that. It's just like, oh, it's just like, I want you don't want to buckle down. It's just like, want to be great scores at 40. It's just like that opportunity can still happen, but like, it's not gonna like fall on your lap. Really, you have to make that opportunity. And that's the thing, is you just like, you have to, in this line of work, and definitely in pretty much nearly any profession, you have to create those opportunities to yourself. Really, I want to slightly move on and basically like know what is the fundamental mindsets or little bits of like mental advice that we should have when we start getting started. And it's a very interesting topic because it's just like, there's a lot of things I wish I would have known when I started, because it is a grueling process. So I want to start with Chiron. What would you think was the piece of knowledge or like advice that you would have liked to have when you first started down this path of career?
So if I wanted to start thinking I want to be a film music composer, the piece of knowledge I'd definitely say is, it's trying to instill, like trying to condense literally a whole career's worth of like,
I'm struggling.
Because it doesn't have to be like a major or profound thing. It could be just as simple as
there's
the
the
simple thing.
moment. I'd say go at your own pace. Don't think that you have to go 100 miles an hour and try and catch the same, like, you know, if you're comparing yourself to someone that's the same age, you don't know what their journey's been up to that point. You don't know if they've had better privileges when it came to, you know, they might have gone to a private school or something and been able to do film music in GCSE or something. And the reason why that they are, you know, they've got better contacts and are better skilled at the same age as you is because of that. So just focus on yourself and go at your own pace. And that kind of ties in with the way Jonny kind of feels, is that if you accept who you are and the way you work, then you go like that. Because that's the issue I had, is that I was constantly comparing myself to other people, and in the end you spend more time worrying about trying to speed up than actually focusing on progressing and advancing in your career. So yeah, make sure that you go at your own pace. Easier said than done, though.
Oh, obviously, there's no easy way of saying things, really. Sam, the same kind of thing to you. What would you say?
I think, yeah, like learn to say no to certain things, because there was a point in my career where I would pretty much take any job because I was like, I want to do music as a living. At the time I was working in a bar, and therefore music job comes across my email account or my Facebook messages or whatever it was. I'll say yes to it, even if I wasn't the best person for the job, even if it wasn't something I was particularly good at. I would say yes to it, and then I'd spend ages on a project that wasn't very well paid, just trying to get it out the door. And I'd hate every minute of it as well, because it's just, I'm trying to make a living out of music and this is not paying me very much and I'm not very good at it. So it would have been better for me to have turned that project down and to have spent more time focusing on getting the right projects, which I did eventually learn, but it took me some time originally to say no to every single job that comes in. It's like, I want to do, I think it comes from a case of desperation. It's like, I want to do music. This is music. I should do this, even if it isn't actually right for me. So that would be my advice, is the right jobs will come along. Don't take everything that comes up once.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that point as well. The same question is to you, Jonny. What would you say?
I would say be critical of the advice that you are given. So I remember when I graduated from university and full of energy, and I was absorbing everything that people were saying to me. I would watch videos online on like how to become a film music composer and how to be a composer. And then I had my family giving me advice on how to get a job. And I was taking it all in and thinking, right, everybody is right. How do I adjust this in my brain? Whereas nowadays, I watch a video, or anybody who's watching, listening to this, be critical of us. Think, is what we're saying actually true from your life experiences? Is it making sense to you? Or are we saying things, or is anybody saying things that you're listening to that you know aren't quite right? Like, I watch videos now from some of my favorite guitarists as an example, and they'll say something maybe off the cuff about music theory. And I go, oh yeah, they're just wrong there. They were probably saying it like in the heat of the moment. Somebody sticks a microphone in the face and tell us about this picking pattern, and they go, and they'll say something, but because they're on a podium, and there's a couple of people on YouTube that I could name that I used to revere who have said things in interviews and the world's gone crazy and they've gone viral. But it's only when you sit down and think about it and you think, actually, no, I'm not going to choose to take in that advice. I'm going to trust myself, and I'm going to trust these other people too.
That is good, and that's very good, interesting advice. Really, to build on what you said, Jonny, is just like people taking advice. There's going to be like, I would say, always be open to learn, because this is a process that is always learning. We always had this misconception, like I don't know if it's the fault of like the institute or anything like that. Really, it's just that when we go through school or when we finish that is when learning finishes. That's completely not true. The world we know is like and practices that we go on is always changing, and we have to basically adapt to it, and we have to like sort of compromise on how we learn these certain new skills and how these environments work into that. And obviously there's always changing on multiple things. But there's one thing I also want to bestow on people listening is that you're going to hear the word no a lot. I promise you, there is like, if you do not have the word no thrown in your face, you are the most luckiest person I have ever met, because it's just like I have not met anyone in this profession has not been said no to, really, and had disappointments within their career. You're going to have a lot of ups and you're going to have a lot of downs, probably a lot more downs in your early career. I can promise you that. I had many rejections on my score has been rejected. I had many films that's been cancelled of their funding. There is no guarantees in whatever when you're getting into the jobs of this market, really. And I don't want to I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, but like the thing is just like that. But that is just the reality. You have to grasp that this is an industry that you're gonna hear the word no a lot, and you are gonna get rejections. You are gonna have like negativity in your career, and there's no way avoiding that. I would say is just basically you have to have a good temperament. There's going to be disappointments. There was one time that I really wanted to work at I was declined for a job to get in Abbey Road Studios. I really wanted to get that job, But at the end of the day, I got another job that I got to work with some amazing people in the film industry. I got to work with an amazing composer, like Gabriel Prokofiev was around the corner. It was just like, you never know what opportunity is going to come around the corner. You may think that is going to be the end of the world, but it's not. The world moves on, really. So that's what I would say is the amazing thing, is just like always be open to something like that. I think that we pretty much covered everything on this episode, really. So like, we're just going to do a quick summary of just basically make sure you have a good portfolio ready for yourself in there. Networking, whether it's online, whether it's in person, or you invest to go into a city or anything like that, or in your local community, always be open to making friends. Don't always just portray yourself as that person who always show specific authenticity. Know your worth basically on your pricing. Or if you eventually want to consult with us on the coaching program, we are there. Links are in the description. I'm guessing Chiron will sort that out, really. And then obviously the pieces of advice, you're going to hear a lot of that stuff. You're going to hear some rejections. You always be patient, pace yourself. There's going to always be critical thinking on that stuff. I would like to thank my co-host for going through these 2-part episode on this topic. Yeah, I hope to catch you on the next episode where we're going to be talking about PROs and royalties, the important parts of payments, which is a crucial thing, and I don't think it's getting talked much or taught very often especially in educational institutes. So it's a very important topic that we need to go on. But until then, I hope you enjoy your day, and we will see you all then next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.